2024 is shaping up to be a really exciting year for desktop Linux. The continued fixing of long-term Wayland issues that honestly should have never been issues in the project from the start. After nearly a decade, the release of KDE Plasma 6, and we are getting very, very close to the alpha of System76's Cosmic desktop environment. A desktop environment not based on Qt, not based on GTK, but a Rust-based toolkit called Iced. And as a Wayland compositor, it's not based on Kwin, it's not based on Mutter, it's not based on WL Roots, it's not based on Western, but a Rust-based compositor library called Smithy. And recently, System76 put out Cosmic, the road to alpha. As it currently stands, there is no specific release date. However, if all goes well, we can release the alpha by the end of March. Be on the lookout for more updates in February. We'll likely have a lot to talk about. We'll see if that happens. If it does, that'll be awesome. But we'll have to wait and see. Because the goal of the Cosmic DE Alpha is to feel like a complete product, albeit with features still to come. With a more stable alpha, we can better collect feedback on usability and focus on completing the settings panels. So it's more like a user test, product feedback, something along those lines, as opposed to a true, okay, this is sort of experimental sort of alpha state that most alphas traditionally were. And whilst I've not done so myself, there is a lot of people out there testing out the pre-alpha stuff, and it seems like, at least right now, it's in a pretty good state, and going by what I'm seeing in the blog post, it seems like it's coming along really, really well, so maybe that alpha actually will happen in a couple of months. I don't think you should give a date unless you have a specific date in mind, because it's usually not going to happen, but I'm hopeful. So let's see some of the stuff we should expect in the Cosmic Alpha. At least in my opinion, some of the stuff they're doing is actually pretty cool and kind of makes me want to try it out when it has a full release. I'm not going to do the alpha, but an actual release and maybe available on other distros like Arch Linux? We'll see how I'm feeling at the time. Firstly, the Cosmic Terminal. If they weren't so Rust-heavy with this environment, you generally expect it to be built something like libVTE, for example. But it's not. Everything in this environment is built with Rust, with very few exceptions. So, they could have just started from scratch and just wrote a terminal. Or there's already a fairly established terminal called Alacrity, which is my personal terminal of choice that they can build off instead. But it is not just blindly shipping Alacrity. Cosmic Term features bidirectional rendering, so left to right and right to left languages, which I don't personally need, but there are a lot of people out there that cannot use a lot of software because their language is not rendered properly. Ligatures, which is also a big thing. I thought ligatures were just a programming thing, but there are some languages which just do not work without ligature support. Desktop themes, syntax themes, and GPU rendering, which is one of the big things you get by using Alacrity. Now, I know a lot of people think that GPU rendering for terminal is kind of a meme. And for most normal use cases, it's kind of a meme. But if you can do it, why not do it? And it also makes use of a custom font renderer. Now you might be wondering, how well does this perform? Well, luckily, Jeremy Soller did do some benchmarks. Now I know it's a little bit hard to read, but the left-hand side is Cosmic, right-hand side is Alacrity. I'll show them blown up to make them a bit easier to see. But it seems like Cosmic is maybe 5 to 10% slower in these test cases, which might sound like a lot. But keep in mind, Alacrity is ridiculously fast. So 10% slower than ridiculously fast is still ridiculously fast, just a little bit less so. For most regular use cases, you're not going to notice the difference. Realistically, the only time you'll actually see a difference is doing these weird benchmark cases like, oh, I'm cutting out a 50 megabyte file and stupid things like that, which you normally wouldn't ever actually do. And if any of that sounds exciting, well, it's pretty easy to test right now because Cosmic Term joins a long list of Cosmic desktop environment projects that are available on NixOS. So if you're a NixOS enjoyer, and I know just mentioning NixOS is going to get people asking like, hey Brodie, where's your NixOS video? I'll get to it eventually. You can run the NixOS package manager on things outside of NixOS, so give it a shot if you want to. As for other distros, details for distro packaging will be released at the same time as the alpha, but that has never stopped individual users from packaging what they want to package. Now, the terminal is one of those things where I could see myself just running this outside of the Cosmic environment. It does still have a lot of things that need to be worked on, feature requests, and all of this fun stuff, but considering it's already built off of Alacrity, which I already like Alacrity, making a better version of Alacrity, you know, that sounds pretty appealing to me. Now, Cosmic, like every other desktop environment, is obviously going to have a tool for configuring your monitor layout. But one of the nice things about X11 is we have something called XRunder. XRunder lets you configure all your monitor layout from the command line. Most of the time, this isn't something you need to do, but if you have a weird setup, you want to change things on the fly, you want to just easily have a launcher that instantly changes between layouts without digging through menus, and you want to have saved layouts and things like this, having a command line tool for this is really nice for those power users. So, let's just make one for Cosmic. Cosmic Runder. We created a command line utility for listing and configuring displays in Wayland, which will be used by the display settings page in Cosmic Settings. It uses the WLR output configuration Wayland protocol, and the screenshots here are taken from the Cosmic terminal. Now, because of this bit right here, where it's actually used by the settings page, this means that Cosmic Runder is a core part of Cosmic. If you install Cosmic, this is going to be available. It's not some additional tool that you need to find and hope that your distro is packaging. I am the kind of person who really likes a multi-monitor setup. I've said it before, but I have 3 displays. I have my main horizontal display, I have my secondary vertical display, and then I have my third, which is basically a glorified teleprompter. I know it's a weird setup, don't at me, but back when I was using a laptop, I would often go between having my laptop, where I just do my laptop things, I get home, I then plug a display into it, and now I have a 2-monitor setup. Or maybe I'm doing a presentation, so I need to plug a projector into it. And having a really nice, convenient way where I can just script all of this stuff in the background and not have to deal with the menus, especially with a presentation, not deal with a menu when I need to have a presentation going on at this very moment, that's very appealing to me. And there is something like this that does exist on the WL root side called WLR Runder. It's not guaranteed it's going to work on every WL roots compositor, but unless they're doing something really, really weird, it probably should. I'm sure Cosmic is going to do it, but the one thing that needs to happen here is there needs to be a simple way to assign a hotkey to running that script. Because yes, I could run the script from my terminal. I don't want to do that. I like hotkeying things that I'm going to use on a fairly frequent basis. Now, obviously Cosmic is going to have a screenshot tool, and it's always unclear sort of what direction you should be taking that. Should it be something like Flameshot, for example, where it's not just a screenshotting tool? Should it have highlighting and notation and text and all of this other stuff? Or should it be pretty much dead simple? It takes a screenshot, and that's pretty much it. And it seems like that direction is the way that Cosmic is going. So with this, we have basically no options. We have take a crop screenshot, take full screen, and presumably this is multi-monitor. Then you can capture it, which will save it to a file, and save to clipboard. And that's everything. And realistically, that's pretty much all I want from a screenshotting tool. I have used Flameshot in the past, and I think Flameshot is a really cool application. The issue is I basically never use the additional functionality, and when I do use it, GIMP does a good enough job. I don't exactly need it at that very moment. I can annotate everything later. Now, the next feature I think is really intriguing. Hybrid graphics. Hybrid graphics mode will be the only graphics mode for Cosmic DE, alongside a power saving setting that turns off the discrete GPU to preserve battery life. Hybrid graphics allows applications to run on the discrete GPU when requested, but otherwise defaults to the CPU's integrated graphics. This is obviously a very laptop-centric feature. You're not doing this on a desktop system. If you're not stupid, your monitor should be plugged into the ports on the GPU. If you're not doing that and there's not something wrong with your GPU, your computer is set up wrong. Please go plug your monitor into the correct thing. Now, the GitHub issue about this goes a little bit more in depth. Separate Intel, hybrid, and NVIDIA modes are no longer necessary. Apps that are set up to prefer the discrete GPU automatically requested, and users can request the discrete GPU by right-clicking an app icon and choosing the discrete GPU. The power and battery applet will display when the discrete GPU is in use and which apps are using it. If the user has a situation where they need the longest possible battery life, or the battery is low and they need it to last longer, choosing battery mode from the same applet will disable the discrete GPU, among other power-saving functions like reducing CPU frequency, turning off keyboard backlight, and reducing display brightness. The idea of it dynamically changing which GPU to be using is not a new concept. The issue is when it doesn't choose the right thing. So having the ability for the user to overwrite what it's doing and saying, no, I don't care what you think is a good idea, go and use the discrete GPU, I think is probably a good enough way to get around that. It's going to be a little bit finicky in those cases where, you know, an app should be using it and they're like, okay, well, why is the app running slow? Oh, it used the wrong GPU. I guess I got to click this thing and do that. I like the idea of having a discrete GPU only mode as an option, but I'm curious to see how this goes. Another really cool concept is floating window stacks. Stacking allows you to pair windows together across applications like tabs in a web browser. So I am a very heavy workspace user. I typically have like 3 or 4 open on each monitor at a time. But I do get people who like tabs. Honestly, when I record videos and research, this is usually the most number of tabs I have open. Normally, it's like 1, 2, or 3, and then other things I do on other workspaces. I'm not a big fan of tabs myself. But if there is an easy way to search through them, I can see the appeal there. It's not something I would personally use, but I'm also not opposed to it being a thing that's just available there. I know there's a lot of people out there that really like the idea of Tmux, for example, and having a bunch of tabs in their terminal. So doing that with other applications, so you have, you know, your web browser, your file manager, your, I don't know, something else in a group together, and you can just easily cycle between them. I'm not going to do it, but try it out. See what happens. See if people like it. And there have always been jank tools to do this, like Tabbed from the Suckless project, but it's kind of jank, and there are a lot of applications that didn't play nicely with it. So having something like this integrated directly into the desktop environment, maintained by the desktop developers, I think could lead to some really interesting workflows. The real question, though, is all of the how do we interact with the tabbing system? Like, okay, if I drag a window up to the tabbed header, should that be what adds it into the tab group? Or do I need to press a hotkey? Do I need to do something in my icon bar? Like, how do I get it into the group? And then when it's in the group, how do I go through the group? Should there be a hotkey to do so? Should you have to click on each of the individual tabs? what should be the approach here? And if this is something you are interested in, there is currently an ongoing discussion on the GitHub about exactly this. Now, a big thing for me is how workspaces function. Designs for workspaces in Cosmic DE are under construction based on numerous discussions around the feature. Considerations include naming and numbering, dynamic and static, and behavior across multiple monitors. Stay tuned. Now, I have a lot of thoughts for how I personally use workspaces, but I think for the general audience, the best thing to do is offer choice. Going down the list, naming and numbering. Numbering makes sense to just be the default because you need some way to label each of the workspaces. But the idea of naming is some people like to have specific workspaces for specific things, like this is my programming workspace, this is my browser workspace, this is my gaming workspace, and things like that. And having a nice way to label that, for some people, can be really useful. I don't do that because I just use whatever workspace is the next one available, but I'm also just not very organized in the way that I like to do things. I kind of just wing it, and it mostly works. But I like the idea of having them both there. As for dynamic and static, this basically means, do you have all of the workspaces open at once, or do you dynamically create them as the user needs them? Now, for my Hyperland setup, by default, it's just dynamic. So I have something on workspace 1 is open. Workspace 2 doesn't have anything, so it is not listed there. If I put a window there, or I'm on the workspace, it now is listed. That, I feel, is totally fine. I feel if you're going to do naming, at least the named ones should be static. But that also introduces the problem of how do you conveniently sort through them. If the idea of sorting through them is using something like super left and right, then it's not really that big of a deal. But if it's super and then a number, now you need some sort of consistent numbering scheme. So it depends on how you want users to cycle. I don't know if they're going to include the idea of going directly to a number. I would hope they would, in which case static probably is the easier thing to do, and then just not displaying them if they're not currently in use. I guess that probably works. As for behavior across multiple monitors, the main concern is, do you have a split workspace system or a shared system? So if I have workspaces 1 to 10 in a split system, I will have workspace 1 to 10 on monitor 1 and workspace 1 to 10 on monitor 2. In a shared system, though, I will have workspace 1 to 7 on monitor 1 and then 8 to 10 on monitor 2, or whatever configuration you would like to have. So the benefit of the shared system is you can easily move windows across to another monitor by just specifying the specific workspace on that monitor you would like to go to. With the split system, though, this gives you a lot more workspaces to work with, and also allows you to move them onto any workspace on that specific monitor without accidentally going over to a different display. I personally like a split system. However, I don't hate that Hyperland by default does a shared system. There is a plugin to add split if you would like it. Awesome WM does a split system by default. I've used both. I've used both for quite a while. And whilst I have my preference, I wouldn't say it's a very strong preference at this point. Now, if you're curious about how all of this is coming together, Jeremy Soller has posted some screenshots over on Mastodon, and for the most part, I think it does work pretty well. At least the dark theme. I think their light theme is genuinely one of the worst light themes I have ever seen. It looks like a light theme where it's been like badly applied, like it's an out-of-date theme and element names have changed and it's using the wrong colors for certain things. Like, this being white and this being gray, just, it doesn't work at all. Especially in the terminal. Like, this terminal really looks bad. And I think they need, if they're gonna do a light theme, to completely scrap what they have here and just redo it from the beginning. As an example, here is something I threw together in a minute by just flipping the theme. And obviously, you know, just modifying an image like this is going to be a lot of things that don't work properly, but I feel like going for this approach where your main window is lighter than the sub-windows, that is probably a better way to go about it and is the way that most light themes go. And as can be seen by this, there is a good reason why they do that. Now, as for the dark theme, now they know what they're doing. This looks really, really good. I do have some minor criticisms about it, but this is more of like a personal me thing. I normally don't like using accent colors for header elements, for menu elements. I typically save it for things like highlights and separators and things like that. Normally, I would have this text be white, and then maybe like a bar between this that's colored, or when you click on this, it's using the color and things like that. The other thing I'm not a super big fan of is they're using client-side decorations for their first-party applications. So they have their menuing elements, their application elements in the header bar of the application. This means that if the application is full-screened, the header bar is always going to have to be visible instead of just the controls you want to see. There is going to be the ability to modify the size of the header so it's not as giant as it currently is, but I'm always going to be a server-side decoration fan. I'm never going to hop on board with this. But what do you think? Are you a fan of client-side decorations or server-side decorations? What do you think about the general theme they have here? Do you think the light theme is actually that bad, or am I just trying to oversell it? And are you going to try out Cosmic? Are you currently a PopOS user, and maybe you like what they're doing here, you don't like what they're doing here? Let me know. So if you like the video, go like the video. If you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribers, LiberaPay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and I'll see you in the cosmos.